Are we alone in the universe? Is there a portal to the past? Could we physically travel through time? Can a person come back from the dead? These are just some of the questions that continue to baffle and bewilder us. Though many have tried to answer them, not one definite conclusion has yet been given. This show will tackle that which is unexpected, unexplainable, and unorthodox. Pico de Loro, or Parrot's Peak, stands majestic in the mostly flat province of Cavite. At 664 meters above sea level, it is the highest mountain in the area and is often touted as a smaller version of North America's Rocky Mountains. Apparently, the view from the summit is spectacular, so it's no surprise that many are tempted to scale its heights. But as the law of gravity states, what goes up must come down. But for Cheska, it meant a deadly 80 feet down. Typical hike.
What happened was we woke up early in the morning, then we got dropped off near Puerto Azul at the base of the mountain.
A perilous trail.
Hiking, and then you reach this portion where it's a little more inclined, so you kind of have to, it's not just hiking, now you're kind of going a little uphill a bit and you have to kind of hang on to the branches and things like that to climb up.
But as they go farther and higher, a mishap is about to happen. Cheska unbelievably survived an 80-foot fall. Cheska is an architect by profession and an adventurer by preoccupation. It was the athletic, free-spirited Cheska who decided to climb the peak of Pico de Loro.
First time we went, I think I climbed up one peak and didn't go up to the higher one because I forgot why. I think we didn't have enough time. So the second time we went, we were going to climb the whole thing.
In the summer of 2004, two sisters, Cheska and Amanda Carpo, were on a leisure hike to scale the peak of Pico de Loro. Little did they know that what they thought was an adventure would turn into a death-defying trek.
So we went down from that peak and we started our climb to the second peak. And to get up to the second peak, there's a portion there that's kind of like the face of a cliff. I mean, it's like you have to climb up a cliff. Now it's not just hiking, it's actually like rock climbing kind of thing.
Although this wasn't their first time to hike in Pico de Loro, Cheska and her group failed to anticipate the part of the hike which includes rock climbing to reach the peak of the second summit of Pico de Loro. They came unprepared. With no safety equipment to aid their ascent, they nonetheless continued with the climb.
We didn't have any gear with us, like we didn't have any helmets or harnesses or carabiners or anything like that. You're just meant to pull yourself up and stay close to the wall.
But feeling the unsteadiness of the ground, Cheska even mouthed a warning to the group.
What happened, which is what people told me, was that I was climbing up the side of that cliff, holding onto the rope, or my sister was already ahead of me, something like that. And then there was somebody in front of me, or she was in front of me, and I said, "Watch out, it's slippery."
Careful, it's slippery up here!
After the warning, the unexpected occurred. Cheska remembered the wet and slippery slopes of the cliff, and the next thing she knew, she accidentally lost her grip on the rope. In a matter of seconds, Cheska was on the ground, free falling from a bewildering 80 feet. Cheska doesn't remember exactly which part of her body hit the ground first, but her arms and her head received most of the shock.
I broke my arm. I had a lot of gashes and scratches like on my eye and on the rest of my body. And then I had a head injury, a hematoma.
Cheska! As if falling from a staggering height was not enough, Cheska also landed into a crevice. With a broken arm and a terrible head injury. Getting her out of that place was going to be very challenging. Luckily, her sister Amanda and the other mountaineers were not very far.
Hello, Tita Mary.
Her aunt was also coordinating with Lifeline, the hospital, and the helicopter.
He kind of had to jump out of the helicopter, climb down. He's still in his, office doctor shoes, and he had to climb down.
After analyzing the environment, it was decided that a helicopter rescue wasn't possible, and the pilot was forced to leave the scene. As darkness crept in, Cheska's condition faded by the minute, but help kept coming. Not long after, the Marines marched in.
The Marine camp, there's a Marine camp in Cavite, Ternate, and they were radioed and they heard about what happened, and they hiked for hours from the Marine camp to come to get me because there's no way for me to get out of there. So they hiked, they brought a stretcher, they put me on the stretcher and carried me all the way out of there to the ambulance that was waiting. Then the ambulance brought me to Makati Med where my Tita Manchu coordinated all of the doctors to help me. So.
Okay. Pagpipis na lang. Andiyan na.
When chances are returned, what went wrong? Is it the lack of safety gear that made it dangerous to the climbers? Or were they traversing a highly perilous part of the mountain?
Lalo na kung una siguro yung ulo mo, pwedeng sabog talaga yung ulo na masakasakali. Kasi more on bato yun, yung isang kabilang part. Yung kabilang part naman, more on food.
As fit and active as she was, Cheska was confident that she could reach the summit of Pico de Loro. For one, she's been on the mountain before. And secondly, Pico de Loro is considered a minor or easy climb. Her mistake was she made an anthill out of a mountain. It was supposed to be an adventure to remember. Everything was running smoothly. The conditions for hiking were almost perfect. Until...
Careful, it's slippery up here. Cheska! Oh my God, Cheska! Cheska!
Dreams of conquering the peak of Pico de Loro fell to the ground like rocks rolling to the bottom. Pico de Loro in Cavite is a haven for adventurous hikers like Cheska. The serene beauty, lush landscapes, and majestic peaks made it one of the most frequently climbed mountains in Luzon.
The first time that I climbed the mountain, I didn't make it to the top of the peak. It's called Pico de Loro because it's mouth of the bird, so there's two peaks.
Pico de Loro is the highest point within the boundary of Cavite and Batangas, rising an immense 664 meters above sea level. From the summit, it offers travelers a magnificent 360-degree view of the shorelines of Batangas and Manila Bay, while the mountains of Batulao and Talamitam greeted hikers from afar. No wonder up to now, many are still captivated and mesmerized by Pico de Loro's natural beauty and charm. Geologist Rodolfo Tamayo volunteered to join our climb to Pico de Loro to see what could have possibly gone wrong on that day Cheska trekked up the mountain.
This place is what we may call a volcanic terrain. No? So while we were going up, first I noticed that we have lahar deposits, and then we have pyroclastic flow facies and some what we may call as lava flow deposits.
there's areas where it's like off-road. There's some, a little bit mud, a little bit of rocks, and then there's a lot of trees, and then there's a lot of high grass.
Although hiking the trails may seem like a walk in the park, he warns that looks can be very deceiving. Based on the initial assessment of Mr. Tamayo, several factors may have caused the accident.
These fractures can lead to the easy, slip or fall of rock materials, giving rise to steep slopes, relatively sometimes vertical slopes that are difficult to climb and also dangerous to climb because rocks can easily fall along these steep slopes.
Weather conditions are another factor that climbers sometimes ignore when attempting a summit climb. Unpredictable winds ranging from 40 kilometers per hour and above can lead to disasters, making Pico de Loro perilous for first-time hikers and climbers.
The cloud-heavy or the water-heavy clouds coming from the ocean slamming into the mountains would drop most of its water on the side of the mountain which faces the ocean. That would be a major, an important factor to consider. We call it the orographic effect.
The composition of the rocks in Pico de Loro should also be considered. Solid rocks comprise Pico de Loro's mountain floor, another reason why accidents are likely to occur.
Some are well fractured, some are sheared, some are relatively massive. All these things, they come together, and in general, that would just in a way increase the risk to you.
For experienced climbers like Antonio Lavadia, climbing Pico de Loro is not a difficult feat.
Pico de Oro magandang training ground for mga beginners kasi medyo hindi siya ganun ka-technical para akyat mo.
It may be an easy trek for experienced mountaineers, but sometimes even the pros face the unexpected.
Hindi naman siya ganun kahirap, hindi naman ganun kadali. Pero sa safety naman, medyo may part lang. Pero kung may proper gear or proper equipment, masasabi ko na safe siyang akyatin.
Cheska and her sister were no strangers to Pico de Loro. On their initial outing, the two sisters already reached the first of two peaks and saw no threat or obstacle to get to the higher tip. They didn't find it necessary to have the appropriate climbing gear. Every climber should wear the proper attire, shoes, and must have the right gadgets to successfully finish a safe climb.
Kasi hindi naman lahat ng bundok kailangan ng tali, kailangan ng harness, or ibang equipment. Pero sa Pico, masasabi ko, kung aakyat kayo dun sa kabilang bato, siguro mas maganda kung may equipment ka for rock climbing or wall climbing para safe yung pag-akyat.
But gadgets and gear are not enough to assure one's safety and survival. Lavadia stresses the need to have the proper training and skills to be able to conquer a given mountain.
Mahalaga yung first aid sa climbing. Tapos yung BMC1, tent pitching, gano'n, backpackaging. Tapos yung trail sign, marunong kang bumasa ng mga trail sign. Tapos orienteering or land navigation para in case mawala ka, makakauwi ka pa rin.
In the case of Cheska, the prior climb up Pico de Loro didn't make up for her lack of training and formal background in mountaineering. That, according to Lavadia, is one factor why Cheska wasn't prepared to handle the hazards of scaling the steep cliff.
Malaking tulong yung skill sa knowledge. Siyempre, halimbawa, may nalaglag, kung may alam ka sa first aid, pwedeng mabawasan yung incident na ma-50-50 siya or mamatay.
Having an experienced mountaineer or guide during every climbing expedition is also a must. But again, in the case of Cheska, there were no guides to accompany them during the trek, leaving them vulnerable to disaster and danger. For experts like Tamayo and Lavadia, Cheska's survival is something to be thankful for. But remarkable as it was, they wouldn't really consider it a miracle.
Obviously, something that would tend to break or fall would in a way, protect you or help you survive the fall.
Malaking tulong yon yung location kasi yon kung yung sa kabilang part talagang lalo na kung una siguro yung ulo mo, pwedeng sabog talaga yung ulo mo kung sakasakali kasi more on bato yon yung isang kabilang part. Yung kabilang part naman more on puno.
Many may have doubts on the surprising recovery of Cheska after the fall. But one thing is for sure, the unforgettable experience will always be a lesson learned the hard way.
It's an interplay of the impact or the severity of the fall, and of course, you have to consider the strength of the bones.
The human body is a marvelous machine, composed of a billion parts intricately woven together to perform a certain function. But as miraculous as it is, the human body is only mortal, subject to wear and tear, diseases, and injuries. So how is it possible that a human body standing a mere 5 feet tall, of average frame, survived a fatal mountain crash? Cheska's 80-foot fall is tantamount to plunging from a 5-story building. Simple whiplash could cause a person to die immediately. Cheska survived despite contusions to her head, thanks in part to the protection provided by the human skull.
Yung skull, this is a very hard substance, no? It's usually a composition of a cartilage and connective tissue na as we grow old, no, ossification process, it will become a very hard and thick substance that protects the brain, no? Usually by 8 weeks age of gestation, doon nagsisimula yung formation ng ossification ng skull natin.
To say that the skull is as solid as a rock is an understatement. It is one of nature's most durable substances. But like all things in nature, nothing is invincible. The adult human skull is made up of 22 bones. These bones have their own functions, primarily to protect the brain, to support the face, and encase the auditory ossicles of the middle ear.
It's an interplay of the impact or the severity of the fall, and of course, you have to consider the strength of the bones. An example here is if a teenager slips and falls, maybe what she will get would be a contusion, yung bugbog, no? But an older patient, someone who is menopausal, past her 50s or 60s, a similar fall will result in a fracture of the bone.
However, the most life-threatening impact would be on the neurocranium or the brain case. Such was the case of Cheska's 80-foot fall, where she incurred a fractured skull.
The skull fracture per se is dangerous, no, because sometimes it needs surgery already, no. Pag may fracture yung skull, isang possibility baka ma-operan yung skull niya, no. After nagkaroon ng fracture, yun nga, nagkakaroon ng mga cerebral concussion, cerebral contusion. So these patients sometimes after the head injury, they have loss of consciousness.
But Cheska's fall is considered one in a million.
Well, I was told about her case, and I think this is a combination, barring the supernatural aspect, no, just combining the two S, no, that I'm trying to imagine, science and suerte. It's still possible to survive if your fall is broken. No, it means it's not a sudden drop.
Cheska's sister, family, friends, and even rescuers expected the worst scenario. But to everybody's relief, the injuries were nothing close to fatal.
I was bleeding, and I remember, the only thing I remember was when I woke up, I was in the hospital and they were gonna give me an MRI or head scan, CT scan, CT scan. And when I sat up, that's the first thing I remember.
Cheska's main injury was in her temple and was diagnosed with hematoma.
Usually, pag ganyan ang manifestation, what will happen is really fracture depending on the degree or the height of the fall, and then the fracture in itself can cause hematoma or hemorrhage inside the brain, and then it will cause increased pressure in the brain that will cause brain damage.
Hematoma is defined as the localized collection of the blood, or clotted in a tissue or organ. This can happen in any part of the body, but hematoma in the skull is the most serious type.
The common complications after head injury is post-traumatic headache and dizziness. No? Yung mga pasyente, once they regain their consciousness, nagko-complain sila laging masakit ang ulo, sometimes nahihilo. Okay? Ang cause is the jarring of the brain during the head trauma.
What could have saved Cheska from more tragic injuries? Orthopedic specialist Dr. Brix Pujalte has some theories of Cheska's fall.
It wasn't a sudden drop. Her fall was broken by trees, shrubs, maybe rocks, vines, roots. We were not sure if she was able to hold on to those, but nevertheless, there's also the aspect of luck.
Neurologist Dr. Dairit also agrees with Dr. Pujalte.
Looking at the physical examination of the patient, no, marami siyang mga fracture, marami siyang mga wounds, lacerations sa body. So mukhang tumama muna siguro yung kanyang trunk or yung kanyang extremities bago yung head. No, secondary head injury ito.
When we return, can we break the law of nature? Last month, actress Natasha Richardson died in a skiing accident after sustaining injuries to her head. It was reported that the accident didn't result in any immediate or obvious harm, and compared to Cheska's 80-foot plunge, Miss Richardson's fall would have seemed less dangerous, less fatal even. We talked to some experts to find out what prevented Cheska from suffering the same fate. To demonstrate the impact between an object falling 80 feet high to the ground, we conducted an experiment with a coconut falling from a 5-story building. The impact was the same as a human skull falling straight to the ground. But fortunately for Cheska, her natural instinct and the natural state of her environment prevented a direct and powerful impact.
What obstacles are there along the way to impede the motion or to absorb the fall? So if there's vegetation or some other mud or some other surface features that can impede her slide, that can affect the type of fall she has.
Irregularities on the rock formation also diminished her fall, decreasing the speed by which she was falling.
Usually when you fall down, I would think that you'd like to break your falls, and the usual response is to put your arms out in front of you. And so that one can absorb the impact, the initial impact of the fall. And then if ever another part of your body hits the ground, then it would suffer a lesser impact.
Had she fallen faster, the impact could have been stronger and the results could have been different altogether.
It's an interplay of the impact or the severity of the fall, and of course, you have to consider the strength of the bones.
And given that she wasn't wearing any protective gear, it's remarkable that Cheska walked away with only a broken arm and a minor head injury.
Because my arm, I was in a sling. I wasn't in a cast. It was actually, I think it broke in a sort of, the bone wasn't sticking out or anything like that, but it was broken, fractured or something like that.
We already know how Cheska survived the accident, but how did she rise from the ordeal?
I think that I was really lucky, and I felt a lot more thankful and blessed, and that I really have to appreciate the people around me a lot more.
It is human nature to commit mistakes, to undergo suffering, and to feel pain. Cheska Carpo discovered this after plummeting 80 feet from Pico de Loro summit. But she also proved that humans under exceptional circumstances can learn, survive, and rise above and beyond insurmountable odds. Cheska fell 80 feet while scaling Pico de Loro in Cavite. In a blip, Cheska was on the ground, unconscious and barely breathing.
I don't remember the feeling of falling. I don't remember having any kind of flash of like anything. I assume what happened was that I was, of course, really scared.
It was a nightmare that sent Cheska plunging nearly to her death.
I think the recovery was uneventful. That means the accidents or the injuries were not that serious. So she's very, very lucky.
I think my answer to that is what part of the body hit first, okay? If it is the head, 80 feet, I don't think the patient will survive. If the patient will survive, probably it's really a miracle.
The ordeal has come to pass, and the accident did not halt Cheska's spirit.
Cheska! Oh my God, Cheska! Cheska!
I think that I was really lucky, and I felt a lot more thankful and blessed, and that I really have to appreciate the people around me a lot more. And that, I guess what changed in me is that you have to be more careful.
Instead, it stirred on a deeper voice that drew her to pursue further conquests. After recovering from her injuries, she continued being active and adventurous.
I got into triathlon and running, like marathons after that, because like I said, I started running initially, and then I joined my cousin's group.
And instead of recounting the events of April 2004 as a cautionary tale, Cheska distinguishes the ordeal as a triumphant testament that anything is possible.
The miracle was really the people who were all there to help me. If they weren't there, I would have died, definitely, for sure. I don't think I would have made it because I would have been stuck there. So it's not anything like a, big shining light that came and picked me up, or like a bird flew in and carried me out of there, but it's actually real people who helped me. So it's just the goodness of people which isn't a miracle. People are really good. So yes, it's a miracle, and I'm very, very, very lucky.
There are many sides to a story, and people have their own versions of reality. When something extraordinary happens, people's interpretations will always vary. Because in the grand scheme of things, chances are, anything is possible.
I rode in my car, they rode in their car to go to Clark. As we were entering the boundary of Pulilan and San Simon, suddenly a big bus hit me strongly, rear-ended me from the back in full force, to such an extent that the car was a total wreck. I felt that my chest was bursting, my head was very painful, my two legs were paralyzed and I could not move. Fortunately, I could move my arms, although they were in pain. And so I was able to reach for my cell phone, thanks for the cell phone, and was able to reach Sister Gloria and told her I was in an accident. So after 30 minutes of pray over, she then told me, you're okay now, you are cured, so you can now get out of the car.